Hello, everybody. I'm John Cezanne, and I want to welcome everybody to the Olympia Indivisible's Town Hall with Sheriff Derek Sanders. Derek defeated incumbent Sheriff John Snazza to take over at the helm of Thurston County Sheriff's Department in the November 2022 election. When we first heard of the improbable candidacy for his improbable candidacy for Thurston County Sheriff, we were thinking that this is a real long shot. But Derek turned out to be a formidable candidate. He won the primary handily and came through with a huge win in the general election. So we supported and endorsed Derek in his race because we were looking for reform and positive change at the department. So tonight we're excited to hear from Sheriff Sanders on the state of the department after a little over a year since he took over as sheriff. So, Derek, how's it going?
It's going good, John. Yeah, I reached out to John maybe a month or two ago and said, hey, as one of the groups that endorsed me, I'd love to come back and just kind of give an update on what it's been like my first year in office. As many of you know, no political experience, no political ties. And kind of what it's been like to jump into this rocket ship, I guess, if you will.
So, would you go ahead and tell us?
All right. Just want to make sure you didn't have anything else. So, for those of you that I have not spoken to directly before, my name is Derek Sanders. I've been the elected sheriff of Thurston County for 15 months now. As many of you know, I started my law enforcement career at Lacey Police Department. I was a cadet for 2 years. I then spent 6 years approximately as a deputy sheriff for Thurston County. I was kind of in the process of figuring out where I wanted to go. I knew I didn't want to stay at the sheriff's office. I wasn't very happy with the way that things were being done here. There were a lot of things being covered up. There were a lot of things not being discussed with the community, and I just felt like I needed to have a fresh change of scenery. The previous sheriff, we went back and forth a little bit, and I ended up deciding to run for office. Kind of like what John said, wasn't really actually planning to win, but ended up winning. And at that point, I had to figure out how I was gonna do this. And when I ran for office, I had basically a bunch of theories. I'm not a scientist, so they're just theories, but I had a couple different theories. One of them was that we could have a competent police department that is also transparent and accountable. That those two things are not mutually exclusive from each other. I also had a theory that if we took better care of our staff, they would take better care of our citizens. So that was another theory that I had. And the third theory I had was that you don't have to be the highest paying agency in the entire world to recruit and retain people. And so with those three theories, they're kind of coming true. Some are more challenging than others. The first I'll start with is that you can be accountable and transparent. And I think that we've done a pretty decent job of that over the last year, approximately. We have increased our social media presence pretty significantly. We have increased our recruiting efforts pretty significantly. Even though we haven't changed anything necessarily about our recruiting efforts, we're still doing mostly the college and JBLM thing. We've seen a lot more minorities apply, which has been kind of cool. And, that could be significant. I mean, we do have a very diversified command staff now. So it's certainly possible that is just happenstance. It's also possible that people of color and women and minorities are seeing people who look like them in successful places and think that's a place where I could go succeed. So kind of still up in the air on that one as far as what's actually driving that. The second piece is that by treating our employees better, that they'll treat citizens better. We have received very few, I'll say, legitimate complaints. One thing about sheriff, and I'm sure none of you could ever imagine this, but I do get a lot of random things through email and through mail. I mean, there's just a ton of people who reach out, and a lot of times people are sending like Morse code, and so it's been a kind of a toss up of trying to figure out like what are someone right now is suing me because of something that allegedly occurred in Canada, I think is what the premise of this all is. And so we're trying to sift through a lot of, I think, the office of sheriff attracts a lot of people who have mental health issues and things like that to reach out to the sheriff, because people are under the impression that I'm going to go like arrest the president or arrest the governor or stuff like that. So we get a ton of stuff about that. But when it comes to legitimate officer complaints, we've been getting very few officer complaints. On the other hand, we've also been treating our staff a lot better, in my opinion. We have changed, I mean, just about every policy we've gone through and looked and said, is this promoting public safety? Is it financially responsible? And is it actually helping our people do their jobs better? I mean, just small things that made a big difference, like our support staff not being allowed to leave the building on their lunch break. Why would they not be allowed to leave the building on their lunch break? Well, we found out it was a policy that said, well, we may need them for an emergency. I'm like, these people are entering warrants and, answering phones and taking their breaks back and forth. I'm like, we don't need you for an emergency, leave. And those are the small things that I think do go a long ways. But it kind of showed me just how archaic some of our policies and procedures were, doing a lot of things just because that's the way it's always been done. On the other hand, we've been really trying to make employee wellness an actual tangible thing and not just a buzzword or an app on a phone. And so part of what that's looked like is moving towards a system that allows employees to work out on duty as long as they don't have any calls pending. That's not very often right now, but it's still something. We also allow our staff to do some online schoolwork in between calls as well. So if they want to advance their education, they're allowed to work on that stuff, so long as all their training and everything is up to date. Obviously, we saw the passing of the public safety tax this year. The sheriff's office is faced with some challenges that are very unique to our city counterparts. The big one obviously is pay. We are not the highest paying agency in this area. In fact, throughout the county, I think the only agency that pays less than we do is Tenino Police Department, and they're only responsible for about 1,300 citizens and have 3 police officers. So, and they're right behind us. So pay has been a big challenge. I mean, even just at the end of last year, beginning of this year, we lost 4 more deputies to higher paying agencies. And so that part is always going to be a challenge. But the big thing that's been my biggest concern and what I pushed for really hard was the new public safety sales tax to get us some more deputy sheriffs. I've been hammering the statistics for a long time, but Washington State is the worst staffed state in the entire country, even behind District of Columbia and officers per capita. So we are 51 out of 51 in officers per capita. And if you zoom in at the state level, we were 38 out of 39 counties and deputies per staffing per capita, sitting at just over 0.6 deputies per 1,000 people. What this creates, what that actually looks like, if you will, at the ground level is the bottom line is deputy sheriffs have to go to violent calls by themselves. That is not the industry standard. That is not a pillar of the 21st century policing plan. We are still doing things the way we have always been doing them. We are an overtime based agency. Right now, I've got 35 working deputies out of our 59 slotted available funded positions. Now, that includes people who are training, people who are at the academy, deputies who are out on paid family medical leave, all those different things. But the big thing I try to communicate to the public is that if we had 80 deputies and we're down 20, well, I mean, we can make that work. We'd have 2 deputies responding to calls. We'd have 2 deputies per district, and they'd be backing each other. The problem is that when your staffing levels have remained relatively unchanged for 2 decades, when we bottom out hard. Just in the last 7 days, from Saturday to Sunday, we had 3 homicides in Thurston County, 3 homicide investigations. And we got to the point where we didn't have any detectives. We're out. I mean, we had to basically take the report and sit on it for a little bit. And if any of you have watched the first 48, that is not a good strategy. Your hope is that you are already building leads and tailing people in the first 48 hours of a homicide. So just some of those things in general. I was glad that the community was supportive and they overwhelmingly passed the public safety sales tax. Those positions will be coming in the near future. So we've got, I think, a total of like 10 or so positions that are funded this year. We're phasing them in, so it's not all going to be at one time. A couple other things, and then I'd rather take questions. Is One of the things I have not gotten to as part of my initial pitch campaigning has been the community advisory board. It is 100% still on the table. One of the positions that we're trying to create with the new public safety sales tax is actually like a PIO, public information officer kind of community liaison. What I really found out is that while I really want to have something like a community advisory board, it is more important that 911 calls and homicides get handled. So we just haven't had the staff. That's just been the most straightforward answer. And unfortunately, I found out that it's not as easy as just getting a board of people together and hashing it out and having good conversations once a month. There's actually a ton of laws that surround community advisory boards and how people on the boards are selected and how the boards are governed and all those things. So it just takes manpower from someone at Thurston County Sheriff's Office that we just haven't had yet. However, it sounds like that position will be coming out in 2025. So my hope is that we will get that up and running as soon as I have the staff to do that. And then the last thing I'll say is that we've kind of taken both sides of the coin here. I have a very strong stance on serious criminal offenses that are occurring in our county. The sex offenses, the homicides, the driving under the influence, all these, the burglaries, the auto thefts. We've taken a very strong stance on those. Contrarily, we've also taken a strong stance against employee misconduct. We had a rash of sexual harassments and even sexual assaults that were basically delayed in reporting. And it was kind of a strange thing because I was trying to figure out, what kind of culture issue do we have at the sheriff's office? And is it still occurring? I think were the biggest questions. Those questions will be answered by Washington State University, as I have invited them to come conduct an internal survey, basically an entire top-down evaluation of my agency, to give us a real perspective of like, what's the culture actually like when I can't watch everyone. So I need to know what it's actually like. We've also held those employees accountable. So, these employees who were sexually harassing other people, we fired them all. One of them, we actually sent the investigation over to Olympia Police Department. They found probable cause for assault fourth degree with sexual motivation, and charges were filed with the prosecutor's office. So, for me at least, having seen what's happened on the inside of this agency for the last 6 years, that's been a stark difference. And how we handle that internal misconduct. Back in the day, that would have been a brush under the rug. Don't tell the public. That's embarrassing. My bigger thing was, first of all, I'm not going to tolerate that. And secondly, everyone needs to know what's going on and how we're dealing with the problem. Just because we don't tell the public it's a problem doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist. So we've really tried to take a strong stance on all those things. And oddly enough, despite some of the concerns about the way that of doing things this way, staff seem happy. The workplace seems to have improved. People seem very comfortable coming forward and talking about things. We created a new innovation memo, so employees at the very bottom can send their ideas directly to me, and we've already implemented a number of those things. So it's an exciting time at the sheriff's office. I think that we've certainly garnered plenty of attention, but at the same time, I had to find strategies to get to a point where we could really kind of put ourselves on the map and create this unique niche where we're a very competent agency, but we're also one that doesn't tolerate the internal misconduct. And those are the employees that I want to bring on. So without further ado, I don't want to take up too much more time rambling on because I can do that for some time. But I'd rather get to some questions if people have specific questions they have for me.
Yeah, well, actually, there were several questions that were submitted prior to, during the registration process. So I have a whole bunch of questions for you.
Okay.
If anybody wants to put another question in the chat, feel free to do so. But we got a bunch already, and I'm going to go with those first. So here's one from me, is just to start things off. I'd like to hear a little bit about your ideas about the initiative I-2113 that just passed the legislature. And for those who are not familiar with that, that's the initiative would allow local jurisdictions to roll back some of the restrictions on police pursuits. and you were very vocal in support of this. And I saw a report released by the San Francisco Chronicle that said in the 5 years between 2017 and 2022, 3,326 people died as a result of pursuits. And of those, 550 were innocent bystanders. So my question to you is, what will you do as sheriff to make sure officers are being judicious in their ability to make good decisions about pursuits?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was a strong supporter of I-2113. The previous year, I testified numerous times trying to get some of these restrictions lifted on vehicle pursuits. And no matter what your argument is on vehicle pursuits, the big term on there is collateral damage. And we basically, both sides were arguing the same direction, or under the same context, which was collateral damage. On one hand, we recognize that car chases are dangerous. On the other hand, in law enforcement, we looked at what have been the repercussions since not allowing car chases. What has that collateral damage been? And the big discrepancy, the big argument, I think, over this item was not over the statistics, because everyone pretty much universally agreed that crime has gone up. Road fatalities not involving police pursuits has gone up significantly. In fact, the state's traffic commission has pretty much declared a public safety crisis on our roads at this point. The big stickler there was, well, is it because of the pursuit law, or is it because of something else? Now, no one can really answer that question, and both sides are going to argue their points. But for me, the biggest issue that we saw in law enforcement was strictly the fact that the restrictions were so cut and dry on a piece of paper in the law that said, here are all the things that you can get away with if you just run. That was our problem. There was no nuance to this law. And so it was really interesting to see, and again, maybe it's total happenstance, but how many people very narrowly committed crimes that they couldn't be pursued for. Those crimes exploded. And that was where I think we had a lot of concern, is it's kind of seeming like these people know what they can and can't be chased for. And then a lot of times, if we happen to catch them, like we got them spiked or something like that, they would tell us, why were you chasing? Why were you chasing us? We had people call 911 and say, the police are chasing me. This is an illegal pursuit. So it changed the mentality around crime in our state. And for us at the sheriff's office, when it comes to pursuing vehicles, there's two things at hand. One, there's the general danger of a pursuit, but we also have to look statistically in what we're pursuing someone for. And I think that piece matters. The biggest element, I think, personally, to a pursuit is time of day and location. There's a difference between pursuing a car through downtown Olympia for no turn signal at 2 p.m. when school's getting out, and pursuing someone for DUI on a county road at 3 a.m. The risk factors are different there. And so we are in the process of revamping our pursuit policy and trying to figure out what's going to match. But the big thing for us is that we want to make this a guessing game again for people who are committing crimes. Before this law changed, very few people fled from Thurston County Sheriff's Office. Most people pulled over. Very few times do we actually engage in vehicular pursuits. Even though we did pursue for any law violation, most people just were like, the county's going to catch me. I'm just going to pull over and deal with this shoplifting ticket or this speeding ticket or whatever it is. And then as soon as the law changed, all of a sudden we're getting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cars a night that are fleeing traffic stops. And so that is what we want to get away from. We want to get away from the high-speed pursuits. We want to get away from people taking off on simple traffic violations at 100 miles an hour. That's what we want to get away from. The other piece that we're doing is we're looking into all the different pursuit alternative technologies that we can. On March 27th, I meet with the county commissioners to go over the Flock license plate reader cameras, which if we had those installed would have been very helpful on our most recent homicides, as well as some different devices you may have seen, like the Grappler police bumper, which is a net that comes out and grabs the back of the car and just basically hangs onto it. So we are looking at all the different things we can to mitigate high-speed chases. Because we know when the law rolls back, there's still going to be people that don't believe the law has changed back, and it's our job to try and mitigate that as best as we can, while also weighing the public safety aspect There's so many impaired drivers driving out right now. And we have pursued a number of those pretty vigorously to get them off the road as soon as possible so that they don't hit and kill someone.
Okay, well, so here's a question from Ann Hall. What has been the biggest surprise for you from your first year in office? And what changes have you made, if any, regarding responding to burglary and property crimes in local neighborhoods?
So I'll break that down. The biggest surprise by far, unions. I was part of the union, but I was never on like the negotiating board or the president or anything like that. So I was always like, yeah, go unions. I'm a union guy. I've been in the union forever. And then, my first week in office, I'm like, hey, I'm making all these changes. They're going to be fantastic. These are things that everyone can get behind. They're new opportunities. We're doing things different. And I got like 17 demand to bargains from the union. And I was like, oh, there's process to this. And so, I would say we pretty much mastered that process now. We meet with our unions very regularly to keep that relationship up because the one thing I'll tell you is that at the union level, the union can't always stop everything, but man, they can make it painful and slow. So having a good working relationship with our Deputy Sheriff's Association and the jail and our support staff, those have been some of our key focuses is to meet often, talk often, and build some trust. Burglary and I'm sorry, what was the other? Just property crime in general?
Yeah.
Well, those have been a little challenging. We have gotten behind suspect vehicles for property crime pretty routinely. We have found that most of the time they don't pull over. And one of the big challenges and one of the big misconceptions in the public's eyes, I think, is, well, you got a license plate, just find this guy later. And, well, the cars are stolen. They're taking the plates off the cars. The windows are tinted. We've seen garbage bags on the license plates. I mean, I don't want to call it a game, but it's a cat and mouse back and forth of, we get the license plate one time, the next time they take the license plate off. We get in front of them and look into the side of the car the next time. After that, the windows are tinted. And so it's just a back and forth game with a criminal element. That's always been there. That's not new. It's always going to be there. But one of the big things that we've done is we've hired a crime analyst. Now, he's only been on the job for about 2 months now, but he's already starting to gather a more data-driven response to crime and fatal collisions and those kinds of things. So right now, he's in the process of compiling data for us. He's been doing things like giving our deputies notifications on where our most high liability intersections are for fatal crashes. He's also been basically going along, there's always a balance of public private or privacy at homes and things like that, but it's not a secret. We have houses that are problem areas, and we should be focusing more on areas where we're having problems. And so we're just trying to gather more data from the crime analysts to then disperse to our deputies and detectives so they can actually start formulating plans. It's very new, so we need a little bit longer just to actually have good data to go off of, but he's already starting to put out stuff for like our traffic team and whatnot. So I think that the data-driven analysis of where crimes are occurring is going to be huge when it comes to property crime. And like I said earlier, these flock cameras, I know some people have concerns. The city of Olympia looks like they may be going with them. Centralia already has them. Yakima has them. They're going to be extremely helpful if we end up using those cameras to help solve crime because they're able to tell us where stolen cars are. We can use them for amber alerts, silver alerts. Yakima has solved a ton of homicides and robberies with them. And like I said, with our 2 most recent homicides, our suspect vehicles would have driven through where we planned on putting those cameras.
Okay, the next question comes from, forgive me if I mispronounce a name here, but it sounds like Barazer. Any plans for your office to partner with other groups to promote gun safety projects, such as distributing free gun locks, gun buybacks, etc.?
Yes. So one of the things that's been kind of unique in my position now is that I think what you find in this job is I don't do a lot of things with my hands anymore. A lot of what I do is talking and engaging and thinking. When I'm working out at the gym at night, all I'm doing is thinking about what would benefit the community. And one of the things I was thinking of, and again, it's just going to take a little bit more staffing to get there, but would be actually to offer some of these classes. I think that would be a huge community engagement opportunity, whether it's a women's self-defense class where some of our defensive tactics instructors can come teach, basic self-defense, a firearm safety class. We know guns are out there, and we know even if we banned all guns today, there's still a ton of guns out there. There will be, at least until I'm out of this job. And so the idea that we can go to have people come to these events, it won't be a shooting class, but a class where we can talk about gun safety and the 4 pillars of gun safety and giving out free gun locks, which we do have. I 100% want to do that.
Great. This comes from Tanya Walden. Is there a wellness coordinator for your department? How is support being offered to your deputies' staff?
Yeah, so this is a good one. We have a fantastic peer support mental health specialist. Her name is Oriana. She was actually with us today up at the funeral for the fallen trooper. Out of all the things that we didn't get in our budget requests this last go around, the only thing the county commissioners were able to approve was renewing her contract. So we put forward a pretty good argument that Oriana is helping. We've seen Oriana assist with getting deputies back to work. And basically, she does things a little bit different. The typical thought of a mental health provider is that you go to their office. Well, she does have that. She actually is really unique because she just goes on ride-alongs with our deputies. So she'll show up at the station and be like, "Hey, can I go on a ride-along with you?" And they'll go ride around for the night, and she'll follow them on their calls and everything. And if there's any downtime, she just asks. I mean, I've had her with me probably 20 times now. And she'll just say, like, "How are things going? Like, where's the stress coming from?" And so she does a fantastic job. We are extremely excited that her contract's been renewed for 2 years. And then, like I said, we've also been shifting towards some other things as well. So we revamped our gym. So we have brand new gym equipment for our deputies to use. Every time I go there, there's anywhere from 1 to 10 deputies in there who are in there getting a workout in, exercising. And I think everyone in here probably knows just how important it is in any profession and whatever you do to exercise and release those endorphins and get your body moving. In our job, we spend a lot of time sitting. So those are some of the things that I think we're trending in the right direction. I don't think we're going far enough. One of the cool things that we've got going on right now, and like I said, unions and all this other stuff, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, but we have a chiropractor in the community who is interested in providing free on-site service so that deputies could just stop by on their lunch break and actually get their backs adjusted and all these different things. So really, for me, it's about low barrier access to the entire well-being of the employee, not just mental, but also physical.
Okay. Lee Newman asks, what kind of training does the sheriff office have for persons or immigrants who do not speak English?
Ooh. Right now, we do not have any. The policy for us is that if we do not have a deputy who speaks Spanish on duty, we have a service through our phones that connects us with a translator. Honestly, most of the time, just from my own experience, when we're dealing with someone who is, Spanish speaking or doesn't speak English, a lot of the times we get lucky and we're able to basically utilize a family member or someone who's on scene who's able to translate. Otherwise, we end up just using our phone at that point to basically have that conversation through a third party translator. But it's one of those things where we do pay. So if a deputy does speak Spanish, they just have to take a little basic test and they get premium pay for being able to speak Spanish. And that's kind of where that ends. Right now, our training, unfortunately, last year, because we are so understaffed, we actually had to slash a bunch of trainings. So it was kind of the opposite direction that we wanted to go. With the new money, with Proposition 1, we should not have to do that anymore. So we will always have the money to cover the overtime to make sure that deputies are getting trained. One of my big goals for training is to condense the amount of days that we're spending on the basic core elements that we have to do: the shooting, the evoc driving, and the defensive tactics and the patrol tactics. That way we can free up a couple days a year at least to do some what I would call unique training. So some of the different areas that we've been looking at is cultural training, interpersonal communication, report writing, testifying. Those are all things that every agency is trying to figure out how they can free time up to get deputies additional training. It's challenging. So I do think that with the new funding, we're going to have a lot more opportunity to engage in that stuff.
Okay. David Lovell asks, what tactics are you using to bring about culture change among patrol officers, among those working in the jail?
Well, the first one I think was just general accountability. So it's not really a secret that when the new sheriff comes in and people who are doing some crazy stuff are actually getting put under investigation and pulled off of duty, I think that in itself is a start to the culture change. But really, I think it's just been the clear messaging and communication that we've tried to provide to people of, listen, the expectations are very clear. And I really want to be an agency. You can't go too far either direction. If all you do is become heavy-handed with everyone you come in contact with, well, then no one wants to work there, and you don't have an agency. On the other hand, we do still have boundaries. We still have lines in the sand that I've made it very clear. If you cross that line, you're going to be disciplined. So, as far as the tactics, to me, culture is more of a direction. It's not really a destination because the ship is constantly changing with socioeconomic changes and cultural changes and things going on just in society in general. So as we continue to navigate the ship, I think that it's more of a direction that we're constantly going, and we're trying to reevaluate all of those things. As we've seen, we've got issues that have occurred in the jail. We've got issues that have occurred in patrol. But this is also an agency now where people recognize that, man, like not only are we going to get put under investigation if we really do cross that line, but the sheriff's going to talk about it publicly. And I don't really want to be talked about publicly, the fact that I sexually assaulted someone or sexually harassed someone or got caught stealing, whatever it is. It's not something that we keep under the rug anymore. So I think all of that in and of itself is kind of conducive to a more transparent organization. Did I answer that question entirely? There was kind of a lot to it.
Yeah, I think you did I think what you're saying is that the effort to be more transparent in all the activity at the sheriff's department, it's going to help with that culture change.
Yeah, and there's a number of areas that we needed to improve on culture. It wasn't just the issues that I saw where some people were committing crimes and getting away with it. There were also issues with me as a deputy. I was so burned out at this agency, and the laws. One of the big issues that I think people don't recognize is that law enforcement, it takes time to train us. It takes time to get people off the road and into training, and given that time, and when the laws are changing every 8 months, there are times when we haven't even been trained on last time's laws, and they're already switching back. And all of those things start to weigh on you a lot, especially when you're in a job that has a high degree of liability. And so I was one of those people that needed a change in culture because we were all basically handling the 911 calls, and then we would go sit at the station because we were just beat down. So it was also a culture shift, and like, hey, go out in the community, go do an area check, go drive through the neighborhood, go contact people. It doesn't have to be a negative contact. Go talk to people just to talk to people. So there's been a number of different culture shifts. I think it hasn't just been about, how are we going to hold our employees accountable? It's also about how do we really actually truly engage with the community better.
So Carrie Griffiths asks, what can people do about the increase in crime? That's pretty
well, I would say the big thing, and this is just the direction that we're going, and I don't think it's unique to citizens or law enforcement or military, or if it didn't happen on camera, it didn't happen. Unfortunately, it's kind of the direction. It's almost a given, like, hey, something happened. Oh, well, is there footage of it? That's kind of the mindset that our entire world is in right now. So if you don't currently have a home system that is capturing video, I would encourage you to do that. Video is how we are solving almost all of our crimes, whether you're the victim or whether you can help your neighbor out by being a great witness and saying, hey, I've got the vehicle that burglarized your house driving past my house, and I've got the license plate for it. We have a lead now. And you know, I'm not here to sponsor any specific video service. There's tons of them. There's Ring Doorbell and Arlo and all these different apps and whatnot. But if you don't have something that's monitoring the general vicinity of your residence, you know, there's just a decent chance these days that the courts aren't even going to charge it. I mean, that's just where we're at. It's the same thing with us, right? We have body cameras on now, which is something new for the sheriff's office. So it is expected that every encounter that we have that's significant is recorded. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, this guy assaulted me. Well, was your body camera on? You know, it's the first question now. So I would encourage, you know, if you can be a good witness, if you can pull a cell phone out and record something, we don't want you to put yourself in harm's way, but the things that make and break cases are not deputy sheriffs and detectives, they're witnesses.
So you see that as a deterrent also.
100%. People don't want to be caught on camera. And, you know, a lot of our crime, especially property crime, is crime of opportunity. It's not necessarily targeted. It really, I wouldn't say, in the only sense that it seems generally targeted. We have domestic violence, and then we have, you know, targeted in the sense that someone doesn't have any form of security on their property. It's not gated. There's no security system. There's no video system. They don't have a dog. The house looks abandoned. If too many things stack up, we start to overexpose ourselves to being victimized.
Okay. So Belinda Holman asks, has the turnover rate of employees changed since you became sheriff? And what are your goals for the coming year?
Yes, it has. So in 2022, I want to say we lost about a dozen deputy sheriffs to other agencies. Some went to other states. We lost quite a few to Lacey Police Department. In 2022, we lost, I think, one deputy sheriff, and he basically was like, I love this place now. I'm moving back to Minnesota to be with my family. In 2024, at the very beginning of this year, we did lose two to the Port of Seattle, two to the city of Lacey. They all said they left because of money. So if you can imagine, I am asking the county commissioners to increase the salary of our deputy sheriffs a little bit. That should probably come as no surprise. At the end of the day, I mean, we can make the best culture in the world, but people still have families to feed, and they're still dealing with the same issues everyone else is dealing with inflation, interest rates, all these different things. So, you know, if they fall too far behind, at some point, people have to make business decisions for their families. With that being said, I think we have done a pretty good job so far of finding creative ways to help mitigate some of that. We've changed some of our take-home car policies as far as when people get take-home cars. We've done a ton of things. We've negotiated a contract with our support staff. Some of our support staff were doing really, really bad as far as pay goes. When you talk about someone who is doing the crucial job of ensuring that a warrant suspect's name is entered correctly so they don't get transposed with someone else and the wrong person doesn't get arrested, and they're making, you know, $42,000 a year, you know, the job and the risk that comes with the job isn't quite matching the pay. Thankfully, I went and talked to the county commissioners, and we got them a record contract of a 9% and an 11% raise for those two positions. So I will say our county commissioners have been awesome. They have been awesome to work with. Ty Mincer, Gary Edwards, and Carolina Mejia have all been fantastic partners in all this. They recognize that we have challenges, and they have been working really hard to help us fix that. So I think in the future, you're just going to continue to see more collaboration. I'll say one last thing, too, on that note. One of the things when I ran for office, one of my suggestions was, you know, the sheriff's office has all these vacancies, right? And at the end of the year, we just give that money back to the general fund. Why don't we reinvest that money back into the people who are carrying the heavy load right now through overtime and whatnot? That way they don't leave. Because if they leave, now we're just even worse off than we were before. And it was kind of interesting because during the campaign, I was flat out told that was illegal. that we can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And I think that it actually just ended up being that no one had really thought of it like that before on the other campaign team. Because one of the first things we did was we came in and we started reinvesting that money back into the staff. So like our jail deputies right now are getting double time for all overtime payout because staffing was low. And so we're using the money from the vacancy savings to reinvest that money back into our jail staff. And we started actually plugging some holes. We went from 30 vacancies, now we're down to 22. So using the money that's already there to keep the employees who are already there has been a strategy that has worked so far.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're making progress, but we need more deputies, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's tough going, and what you've seen, we're doing lateral signing bonuses, but people have to recognize all that law enforcement agencies are doing right now is stealing from each other. So we've got a bunch of lateral apps. That just means there's holes somewhere else. It is just a rough go. I think in all professions right now are struggling a little bit.
Okay, so let's see. Meredith Rafferty asks, with the implementation of the 988 mental health crisis hotline, is the sheriff's office experiencing a difference in their responses? In your role, how do you interact the number of calls?
So we don't really know because the 988 line is not coming to Thurston County. It's going to King County, I believe. So it's like with here, right? So if you call 911 right now, you're getting TCOM, which is located in Olympia. And Olympia only dispatches for agencies that work within Thurston County. So that's the fire, EMS, and law enforcement. When someone calls 988, they're getting a crisis line that is up in King County, and we have no idea what's going on with them. So there's been a little bit of a criticism with how that works. I've met with Olympic Health and Recovery Services, they are fantastic partners. They provide us our mental health co-responder team, the Scout team. And one of their big pushes is that they want those call centers localized. So they want, when someone calls 988, it's just like 911. When you call 911, you don't get Spokane, you don't get Idaho, you get Thurston County, and you get Thurston County dispatchers who are familiar with the resources that are here in Thurston County. I think that's been kind of a little bit of an issue with the 988 line right now. What I will say is that we still get most of our mental health calls coming through 911. I can guarantee you that. However, using the Scout team and that co-responder model, I would argue the Scout team is probably handling 95% of our mental health calls now. Unless there is a safety threat to another person or the Scout team, the sheriff's deputies aren't going to mental health calls anymore.
Okay, so, well, Kathy Strauss says, why are you so consistently opposed to police reform and accountability legislation?
Well, that sounds like a trick question because I don't think I am. If you say that against police reform or something like Initiative 2113, then I guess we would just have to agree to disagree. I think there should be more nuance in that law. However, when we talk about police reform and accountability, there's a couple different things I can say. This year I supported the ban for police to hog tie individuals. I fully supported that bill publicly. And, the reason for that was that it was a tactic that not only did we not really even use anymore, but it was ineffective when we did use it. And we have better tools and technology now that don't require us to hog tie people. We have what's called the wrap system, which is safer for the officer. It's safer for the person who's being put in the wrap, and it's easier to use. It's actually more effective. So things like that were tactics where we should be moving on from things like that. So, I don't know. I think I've been maybe one of the only real law enforcement executives who's been asking for additional reform, that we haven't gone far enough. One of the big things that we have not done is, we've started this decertification program for bad police officers, but it takes so damn long. I mean, it's 2 years before CJTC is actually getting around to hearing these cases for these officers who have been suspended. And that's not good for anyone. It's not good for the agency who's got a dud sitting there that they don't know what to do with. And it's not good for the public who's waiting 2 years to find out if this person is fit to be a public servant. Another issue that I brought forward to our legislator, it just didn't get any traction this year. I fired an employee right when I got hired, right when I got elected for getting a DUI. Going 80 down the freeway and getting pulled over by state patrol. He was a corrections deputy. And I fired him, and he fought it, took it to arbitration, and an arbitrator gave him his job back and said that he was a really nice guy. And so that's another area where I'm trying to work with our legislators to draft some language that says, if an agency fires an employee for a criminal offense or an act of misconduct or honesty issue, that an arbitrator must find just cause for termination. So they can still they would still be able to arbitrate through the union, that didn't happen or that wasn't me, but they couldn't do what he did, which is, yeah, I did it, so what? And get their job back. So I'm personally going to disagree with the sentiment around that question and say that my work is not even remotely done when it comes to the accountability side of things. But reform is a large, open-ended statement, and that can entail a lot of different things. So it would have to be more specific. I don't just say I'm against or for reform. I take each individual topic, examine it, and determine whether or not it's appropriate and whether or not it's beneficial.
Okay, this one from Lisa Ornstein. I would like to hear from Sheriff Sanders about his thoughts about Lacey's 14,934 square foot police training center, which seems heavily focused on munitions training.
Well, so that facility, they're building a new police department, and they're building a new training facility back by the existing city hall. So to my knowledge, that training facility includes classroom space. It includes an 8-lane shooting range, and it has basically like a virtual reality room as well. And then I think it had some room for some like defensive tactics training, like some mats and stuff. What I'll say about the gun range is that every agency in this county is looking for a place for a gun range. There aren't any. Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, actually every agency in this county shoots in the woods. So listen, I am not tone deaf to the idea of police officers training how to shoot their guns. I get it. Like, that's always going to be a sensitive area, I think, for people, right? At the end of the day, we carry firearms. People out in the public have firearms. We want to be proficient with those firearms in the event that we ever have to use them. Hopefully we do not. That being said, having an area to actually do that training would be helpful. At this point in time, the county has no option other than to shoot in the woods. So the other agencies that aren't Lacey Police Department are going to be out shooting in the woods. And maybe that's as good as it's ever going to get. I can tell you that I think most other agencies across our state have a shooting range of some sort, whether it's a private range owned by a private company that they contract with. We don't have any of those here. Or they have their own indoor range. We just don't have that here. The next part I'll say is, the classroom and the defensive tactics stuff, that's all stuff that I completely support. We want to be proficient in both what we learn about new laws and also our ability to defend people and do things with our hands that don't require lethal force. And then the last thing I'll say is, as a general statement, Thurston County, the thing that people really have to understand about Thurston County is that we lack the infrastructure across the entire county. There isn't much training space. I've got some DT mats in a weight room and a small classroom. Lacey has neither of those really. Olympia, kind of. They use a jujitsu gym and have some classroom space. Tumwater, same thing. So we don't have any kind of regional training facility. Most agencies are just trying to get their training checked off with what they have. And so as a conversation about the police department buildings, I'll tell you that the county is also in the process of trying to find us a building as a sheriff's office. No, it will not be $60 million. We are trying to find a building that's already built. I'm actually operating three bureaus out of three buildings currently. So it's very challenging to supervise that. So we are just trying to find one location that fits the sheriff's office, and that way we can get out of everyone's way at the courthouse kind of thing. So overall, the thing people have to remember is that Lacey's police department was built in, I think, 1980s ish. Their population was less than half of what it is now. And the sheriff's office is working out of the courthouse, which was built in the 70s. Once again, our population was about half of what it is now. So the county is running out of space.
Okay. So I have a couple more of my own questions, but there's some that came in the chat. So Janine asks, I believe culture change is modeled and it's very important as well, but there is learning, education, and training, which is crucial to revealing new ideas, modern techniques, etc. Can you speak to any specific kinds of training you're focusing on that you see the need for in the department, which takes you in the direction of your goals?
Yeah, there's a couple different areas. Now, there's a couple different trainings I've taken. I took first line supervisor. I'm actually in my final third week of 21st century leadership and policing, which is another good class. As far as an agency goes, I've kind of talked about them a little bit, but there's two areas that I would really like to focus on. One, defensive tactics. Our employees do not get nearly enough defensive tactics training. There are a ton of studies out there that show that deputies and officers who are more confident in defending themselves with their hands are less likely to escalate and go to lethal and other non-lethal techniques. So defensive tactics is definitely one area where we need to improve, especially because, like I said earlier, deputy sheriffs are still routinely responding to violent crime by themselves. This county, I'm going to be completely honest, is just lucky that we haven't had extreme escalated encounters. When you've got deputies going by themselves at nighttime in the middle of nowhere and dealing with people who are committing violent crime. The second thing I kind of talked about again earlier is I would really like to focus in on the interpersonal communication, and even like what was brought up earlier, a little bit more of the cultural stuff. We are becoming a very diversified county. It is not looking like it did 50 years ago, and with that comes cultural change. And so some of the different key areas that I've worked with, I met with a very nice woman who used to work. I'm forgetting her name off the top of my head. I got her book. She used to work for the superintendent's office at the state superintendent. And one of the things we've been working on together is, what kind of training, because she worked with kids throughout the entire education spectrum, is what kind of training could we give to people who are being onboarded as brand new deputy sheriffs that they should know. That's where the whole idea from like interpersonal communication came in. More of an outward looking position on like racism and policing and things like that, historical context behind policing, because they're there and they exist. And so I'm really mad I can't remember her name right now off the top of my head, because everyone would probably be like, oh yeah, I know her. She's extremely Aaron Jones. Thank you. So we've met with her a number of times. I've met with her off duty and just discussed like, how do we completely revamp the onboarding process? Because there's two critical issues that I see personally in policing. One is training is hard to get, because once deputies become part of that minimum staffing, everyone's relying on them to just do the work. It's a lot easier to get to them before they actually get to the road by themselves, because no one misses a body they don't know exists yet. So we're really trying to revamp that post-academy, pre-actual police work training time, where they don't count towards anything yet. And that's going to be a time where young police officers are very malleable. We can actually shape some of their thoughts and how they plan to go out and police their communities before they actually do it. So going out there and experiencing some of those different things and trying to get feedback from some of those different educators is another area that I'm really pushing toward in the future.
I really appreciate your doing this for us, Derek. It's great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And again, I know people didn't get some of their answers, some of their questions answered. Feel free to just send them to me, however that works for you. You can call up to the sheriff's office, email us. You can reach out to me on Facebook. I'm getting through like literally thousands of messages right now. But I'll try and answer your questions as best I can. I'm not trying to avoid anything. So thank you all very much.